Hello again, and welcome to Tales from the World's Firesides. As usual, I'm Clive Gilson, the story guy, and I'm really pleased you're here today. We're cracking open today a story called The Sea Fight, which is a bit of a spine-tingler from Scandinavian sort of Viking folklore. And it comes from my collection, Tales from the Viking Isles. And I've dusted this story off and polished it up, and now it's ready for you too. So, get comfy, grab that proverbial coffee and biscuit, and let's dive into some folklore magic. When King Ordbjorn and King Arnvind sent out their war arrows, a great host gathered. All men came by sea, and 200 ships lay at anchor in the fjord, looking like strange swimming animals because of their high carved prows and bright paint. There were red and gold dragons with long necks and curved tails, seahorses reared out of the water, green and gold snakes coiled up, and seahawks sat with spread wings, ready to fly. And among all these curved necks stood up the tall, straight masts with the long yard arms swinging across them, holding the looped-up sails. When the starting horn blew, and their sails were let down, it was like the spreading of hundreds of curious flags. Some were striped black and yellow or blue and gold. Some were white with a black raven or a brown bear embroidered on them, or blue with a white seahawk, or black with a gold sun. Some were even edged with fur. As the wind filled the gaudy sails and the ships moved off, the men waved their hands to the women on shore, singing as they rowed to battle. In the prow stood men leaning forward and sniffing the salt air with joy. Some were talking of King Harold. Yesterday, they said, he had a hard fight. Today, therefore, he'll be lying still, dressing his wounds and mending his ships. We shall take him by surprise. They sailed near the coast. Sulfi, in his Seahawk, was ahead, leading the way. Suddenly, men saw his sail veer and his oars flash out. He had quickly turned his boat and was rowing back. He came close to King Arnvind and called, "He's there, ahead! His boats are ready in line of battle. The fox has not been asleep." King Arnvind blew his horn. Slowly his boats came into line with his sea stag in the middle. Again he blew his horn, and cables were thrown across from one prow to the next, and all the ships were tied together so that their sides touched. Then the men set their sails again, and they went past a tongue of land into a broad fjord. In the field, there lay the long line of King Harold's ships with their fierce heads grinning and mocking at the newcomers. At the back of those prows was what looked like a long wall with spots of green and red and blue and yellow and shining gold. It was the locked shields of the men in the bows, and over every shield looked fierce blue eyes. Higher up and further back was another wall of shields, for on the half-deck, in the stern of every ship, stood the captain with his shield guard of 12 men. Arnvind's people had now furled their sails and were taking down the masts, but the ships were still drifting on with the wind. The horn blew, and quickly every man sprang to his place in bow and stern. All were leaning forward with clenched teeth and widespread nostrils. They were clutching their naked swords in their hands, their flashing eyes looking over their own shields. Soon King Arnvid's ships crashed into Harold's line, and immediately the men in the bows began to swing their swords at one another. The soldiers of the shield guard on the high decks began to throw darts and stones and to shoot arrows into the ships opposite them. And so in every ship showers of stones and arrows were falling, and many men died under them or got broken arms or legs. Spears were hurled from deck to deck, and many of them bit deep into men's bodies. In every bow men slashed with their swords at the foes in the opposite ship. Some jumped upon the gunwale to get nearer or hung from the prowhead. Some even leapt into the enemy's boat. King Harold's ship lay prow to prow with King Arnvid's. The battle had been going on for an hour now, and King Harold was still in the stern on the deck. There was a dent in his helmet where a great stone had struck, and there was a gash in his shoulder where a spear had cut, but he was still fighting and laughed as he worked. "Wolf meets wolf today," he shouted, "but things are going badly in the prow," he cried. "Ivar is fallen, Thorstein wounded, a dozen men lying on the bottom of the boat." So he leapt down from the deck and ran along the gunwale, shouting as he went, "Harold and victory!" So he came to the bow and stood swinging his sword as fast as he breathed. Every time it hit a man of Arnvid's force, Harold's own warriors cheered, seeing him fight so well. "Harold and victory," they shouted, and went to work again with good heart. Slowly, King Arnvid's men fell back before Harold's biting sword. Then Harold's men threw a great hook into that boat and pulled it alongside, and still pushed King Arnvid's people back. "Come on, follow me," cried Harold. Then he leapt into King Arnvid's boat, and his warriors followed him. "He comes like a mad wolf," King Arnvid's men said, and they turned and ran back below the deck. Then Arnvid himself leapt down and stood with his sword raised. "Can this young shockhead make cowards of you all?" he cried. But Harold's sword struck him, and he fell dead. Then a big, bloody Viking of King Arnvid leapt upon the edge of the ship and stood there. He held his drinking horn and his sword high in his hands. "Ran, and not you, shockhead, shall have them and me," he cried, and he leapt laughing into the water and was drowned. Many other warriors chose the same death on that terrible day. All along the line of boats, men fought for hours. In some places the cables had been cut and the boats had drifted apart, and ships lay scattered about, 2 by 2, still fighting. Many boats sank, and many men died. Some fled away in their ships, and at the end King Harold had won the battle. So he took King Arnvid's country and King Ordbjorn's country, and many men took the oath and became his friends. But all people were talking about his wonderful battles. That's it for today's tale, which comes straight from some skald sagas as told by Jennie Hall in Viking Tales, published by Rand, McNally Co in Chicago, New York and London in 1902. And it's a real gem of a story. In fact, it's something I've used previously in some written work that I've put together around Viking folklore. Now, I love digging up these hidden treasures and breathing new life into them, as you know. My main aim is to keep folklore alive for new generations and to establish some links across cultures. If you want more, you can grab my books at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any good online or retail store, and there is also a link in the text underneath the video. If you're curious about Tales from the World's Firesides, or yours truly, Clive Gilson, story guy, then head over to clivegilson.com. Before you go though, please smash that like button. It helps more folks find these stories. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. There's well over 100 stories up there now, and I'm dropping fresh stories every week. You'll be joining 30-odd thousand other folk who enjoy the stories. Until next time though, keep reading, keep listening, and stay inspired, and take care.